Title: She Stole My Boyfriend, So I Married Her Dad. Betrayal doesn't always come dressed as a villain. Sometimes it shows up in the people you trust the most, in the friend who knows your secrets, in the lover who once called you their future. My name is Claire, and this story isn't just about heartbreak. It's about how I turned the deepest wound of my life into the sweetest revenge no one ever saw coming. If you're wondering how this all began, let me take you back to where it started. It was a late Friday night, and the rain was falling with a rhythm that mirrored the ache in my chest. I had spent the entire evening preparing Ryan's favorite dinner, even lit the cinnamon candle he liked, and wore the burgundy dress he said made me look like a walking poem. I thought love was patience. That real love required sacrifice. I told myself he was just late because life got in the way. But deep down, something inside me already knew. At 11:47 p.m., a message changed everything. It was from an unknown number, and it simply read, "Check Jessica's story." My heart stuttered. Jessica, my best friend since college, the girl who knew every scar I hid, every dream I whispered, the girl I loved like a sister. I opened Instagram, and what I saw shattered the last bit of hope I had clung to. Ryan and Jessica were on the beach, wrapped in each other like a secret they were finally ready to flaunt. Her head was resting on his shoulder, his hand on her thigh, the same hand that used to wipe away my tears and swear I was his everything. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I just sat there, frozen, as their laughter echoed through my phone and tore holes in my chest. I watched the video again and again until the screen blurred from the tears I didn't realize had started falling. I called Jessica. No answer. Ryan? Straight to voicemail. I couldn't breathe under the weight of betrayal, so I did the only thing I could. I drove. When I arrived at Jessica's apartment, I wasn't expecting closure. I just needed to see it for myself. She opened the door with that same smug smile she wore in the video. "Claire," she said casually, like this was a surprise visit. "You and Ryan were never a good fit. I just helped fate do its job." Her voice was coated in entitlement, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "And Ryan?" He stood behind her like a shadow, silent, spineless, and small. He couldn't even look at me. I turned and walked away without a word, because some betrayals don't deserve a reaction. Sometimes silence is the loudest scream. The days that followed were colorless. Food had no taste. Music sounded hollow. I moved through life like a ghost trapped in my own skin. I was drowning, not in tears, but in the emptiness they left behind. Then, one evening, I received a message that made me blink through the fog. It was from Ethan Adams, Jessica's father. "Claire, I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. I'm here if you ever need someone to talk to." At first, I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. He was her father. Wouldn't he take her side? But grief doesn't always reach for the obvious. Sometimes it finds comfort in the unlikeliest places. And something in his message felt genuine, safe, seen. So, for the first time in weeks, I let my fingers move. I responded. Grief doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just whispers quietly in the corner of your soul, waiting for the right moment to crush you. In the days after that night, I became a ghost in my own life. I walked through my apartment like a stranger, drifting from room to room, surrounded by memories that now felt like lies carved in glass. Ryan's cologne still lingered in the closet. Jessica's laughter echoed in my head like a curse. Every corner of my world was touched by their betrayal. My toothbrush still sat next to his. The photo of us at last year's Christmas party, me in red, him with that fake polished smile, still mocked me from the fridge. I couldn't even bring myself to delete it. Not yet. I'd spent years believing in loyalty, that if you gave someone your heart, they'd protect it. Instead, I was left with nothing but silence and the weight of betrayal clawing at my chest. People talk about heartbreak like it's just a sad song or a pint of ice cream on the couch. But real heartbreak? It rips you apart slowly. It takes your appetite, your sleep, your smile. It replaces them with unanswered questions that echo through your bones at 2 a.m. Why her? Why my best friend? Why did they think I wouldn't find out? One morning, I stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back at me. Eyes swollen, soul tired, cheeks hollowed from nights of not eating. That burgundy dress, the one Ryan loved, was now balled up in the laundry bin like discarded hope. I had given so much of myself to people who saw me as disposable, and yet I didn't cry in front of anyone. That's the thing about women like me. We don't break publicly. We bleed in silence. We smile when our hearts are shattering. We show up to work. We reply to texts. We say, "I'm fine," because it's easier than explaining the war going on inside. But I was tired of being fine. The message from Mr. Adams, Ethan, had been sitting in my inbox for days. I reread it 100 times. "Claire, I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. I'm here if you ever need someone to talk to." I hadn't answered. It felt wrong, complicated. He was Jessica's father, but he had always been kind, polite, the kind of man who held doors open and remembered birthdays. There was a calmness about him, a quiet dignity I'd always admired from afar. And maybe, just maybe, I was desperate to feel seen again. Not as someone's ex, not as the girl who got betrayed, but as Claire. A woman whose heart had been torn apart, but was still beating, just barely. So I replied, "Hi, Ethan, thank you. I don't even know what to say. I'm not okay, but I don't know who else to talk to." He responded instantly. "Then let's talk. No pressure. Just two people going through something difficult. I can call you tonight, if that's okay." That night, for the first time in weeks, I didn't fall asleep to the sound of my own sobs. Instead, I listened to Ethan's voice. Gentle, calm, human. He didn't try to fix me. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He just listened. And when he spoke, it wasn't to tell me I'd get over it. It was to remind me I didn't have to go through it alone. I didn't expect it to feel safe, but it did. And maybe that was the beginning of something I didn't even realize I needed. Something real, something dangerous, something poetic. There's a strange comfort in talking to someone who has nothing to gain from your pain. No hidden agenda, no judgment, just quiet understanding. That's what Ethan gave me. At first, our conversations were simple, courteous check-ins, little exchanges that felt like borrowed breath in the suffocating fog of my heartbreak. But slowly, they deepened. I wasn't just replying anymore. I was looking forward to them. I told him things I hadn't told anyone, like how I felt invisible in my own relationship, how Ryan would brush off my accomplishments with a joke, and how Jessica had always made everything a competition, even love. I didn't know why I was so honest with him. Maybe because Ethan listened. Not the way people listen when they're waiting to talk, but really listened. Every word I spoke found a home in him. One night, I admitted something that left me vulnerable. I don't think I was ever enough for either of them. He didn't respond right away, but when he did, his voice was steady. "Claire, sometimes the problem isn't that we're not enough, it's that we were giving too much to people who didn't know how to receive it." That sentence lived in my chest for days. We began meeting for coffee, then dinners. Nothing romantic, just two broken souls finding solace in shared silence. His presence was like a weighted blanket, grounding, warm, familiar. He saw me in a way no one had before, not as someone shattered, but as someone surviving. The first time he brushed a strand of hair from my face, I froze. Not because it was inappropriate, but because it felt safe, and unfamiliar, and terrifyingly right. I laughed nervously. "This is strange, isn't it?" Ethan smiled gently. Strange doesn't mean wrong. Still, guilt haunted me. I was falling, not just into someone's arms, but into a story that felt too unreal to tell. I was 27, he was 45, and he was Jessica's father. But when you've been destroyed by betrayal, the truth is, love doesn't arrive neatly packaged. Sometimes it walks in wearing brokenness and kindness and a quiet suit, asking nothing from you but your honesty. One evening, I asked him, "Do you think this is just trauma bonding?" He looked at me for a long time before answering. "Maybe, but even if it started in pain, that doesn't mean it can't grow into something real." I didn't respond, but I let him hold my hand. It was the first time I'd felt wanted without being used. The world still felt upside down. Jessica didn't know, neither did Ryan. It was our secret, this fragile bridge we were building over the wreckage they left behind. And though I wasn't ready to define it, I knew this. Something beautiful was growing where everything had once burned. And part of me wanted Jessica to see it burn brighter than anything she ever touched. Grief doesn't vanish overnight. It lingers like smoke, faint, bitter, always clinging to your skin no matter how much you scrub. But something began to shift inside me the more time I spent with Ethan. It wasn't sudden or loud, it was quiet, like the first breeze after a long winter. We didn't talk about Jessica or Ryan much, not directly. He knew, of course, that the wounds were still fresh, raw enough to bleed if touched too quickly. So instead, he taught me how to breathe again, how to exist without drowning in the memory of what they'd done. Sometimes we'd just sit in his backyard, beneath the old oak tree, watching the shadows play on the grass. He'd sip his coffee, I'd sip mine, and we'd let silence say everything words couldn't. One afternoon, I noticed his eyes lingering on mine longer than usual. "You're getting stronger," he said softly, "even if you don't feel it yet." I didn't answer, because a part of me still felt shattered. But for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was breaking apart. I felt like I was slowly being pieced back together. He showed me what gentleness looked like. He'd remember small things, how I liked my tea, how I cried during old jazz ballads, how I always carried a book in my purse but never had the time to read it. One day, he gifted me a worn copy of The Bell Jar. "You mentioned it once," he said, "and I found it at this old bookstore. Figured it was waiting for you." That moment broke me in the most beautiful way, because Ryan never remembered anything unless it made him look good. And Jessica, she remembered only what she could use against me later. Ethan was different. He gave without taking. He saw without judging. We weren't together, not yet, not officially, but our connection deepened like roots growing silently beneath the surface. I felt it in the way his hand would briefly rest on my back when he opened doors, in the way he'd laugh at my dry humor and not try to fix my sadness, just sit with it. One evening, we cooked dinner together, just pasta and red wine, nothing elaborate, but it felt like home. Afterward, we slow danced in his living room. No music, just the rhythm of two people who had been broken by love, now learning how to hold each other gently. I remember resting my head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. I whispered, "I don't know what this is." And he replied, "It doesn't need a name. It just needs to be honest." There was no pressure, no promises, just presence. For the first time, I began to believe that healing didn't always mean forgetting. Sometimes it meant remembering differently, seeing the past for what it was, and still choosing to move forward. I started to laugh again. I started writing again, scribbling thoughts in my old leather journal like I used to in college. There were days I still cried, nights I still dreamt of betrayal. But the pain no longer swallowed me whole. It became manageable. It became part of the story, not the ending. And though I hadn't told anyone about Ethan, I carried the secret like a talisman, a quiet, sacred thing. Jessica was still out there, flaunting Ryan like a trophy she'd stolen from me. But what she didn't know was that I had found something better, something real, something that made her shallow victories look like cheap carnival prizes. She thought she had broken me, but I was rebuilding, brick by brick, with Ethan beside me, steady as stone, and with every sunrise, I felt it more deeply. Revenge wasn't always loud. Sometimes it looked like healing in silence, while the ones who hurt you watched you become everything they feared you'd never survive long enough to be. Some connections don't explode. They hum. Low, steady, like a distant drumbeat that slowly takes over your heartbeat until you can't tell where you end and it begins. That's what Ethan had become to me. Not a distraction, not a rebound, but a rhythm my soul was learning to dance to. It was a Tuesday night, the kind where the moon hung low like it was eavesdropping. I had brought over a bottle of wine, and we sat under the patio lights, just the two of us and the quiet hum of the world finally minding its own business. I don't remember what we were talking about, maybe old books, maybe old wounds, but I do remember the moment he looked at me like I wasn't broken anymore. "You glow differently now," he said, almost to himself. I looked up from my glass, caught off guard. "Do I?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah. Not like someone who's been fixed, like someone who learned how to carry the cracks with pride." Those words hit something deep in me, a part of myself I had buried under months of humiliation and silence. For so long, I believed I was nothing more than what Ryan and Jessica had left behind. But in Ethan's presence, I began to feel valuable again. Not because he told me I was, but because he treated me like I always had been. That night, something shifted. We didn't kiss, not yet, but the air between us changed. It grew thicker, slower, filled with every unsaid word we were too careful to say. His hand brushed against mine as we both reached for the bottle. Neither of us moved. Our fingers stayed there, resting, trembling, questioning. And then he spoke, softly, like a confession. "I never thought I'd feel this way again. But with you, it doesn't scare me. It should have scared me. The age difference, the history, the chaos of it all. But it didn't, because it wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about Jessica. It was about finding something pure in the wreckage, something worth holding on to." I leaned my head on his shoulder, and he didn't move. He just sat there, still and sure, like a lighthouse I hadn't realized I'd been swimming toward in the dark. But of course, the universe doesn't let moments like this go unnoticed for long. A few days later, Jessica called me out of nowhere. I hadn't heard her voice in over a month. It felt foreign, cold, like a knife dipped in sugar. "Claire," she said with false sweetness, "I just wanted to check on you. Ryan and I were worried." Worried. The audacity of that word made me want to laugh. But I didn't. I stayed calm. "I'm doing just fine," I said flatly. "Oh, good," she replied, too eagerly. "I heard you've been spending a lot of time with my dad." The words dropped like glass, so she knew. I didn't answer right away. Let her sit in her own discomfort. Let the silence work like it had once worked on me. "Is that a problem, Jessica?" There was a pause. Just enough for me to know she hadn't expected me to meet her blow with steel. Of course not, she said, but her voice was tight. I just didn't think. Never mind. You do you. But I could feel it, the panic beneath her words, the cracks in her arrogance. She was unraveling, because for the first time, she wasn't in control. That night, Ethan and I sat on the couch, the television playing something neither of us were watching. I told him about the call, about Jessica, about how she knew. He didn't flinch. He just reached for my hand and held it tight. Let them talk, he said. You don't owe them your silence anymore. And he was right. This wasn't just about healing anymore. It was about reclaiming power. Because the sweetest revenge wasn't making Jessica jealous. It was showing her that I could rise, gracefully, unapologetically, and in love with the one person she never imagined I'd have the courage to love. Building from emotional depth into poetic revenge, continuing the seamless first-person cinematic narrative for your story on Revenge Diary. Love doesn't always scream its arrival. Sometimes it walks in barefoot, silent, healing. What I found with Ethan wasn't the fairy tale I used to daydream about in college. It was something better, real, quiet, and rooted in mutual scars. We had been seeing each other for months, secretly, carefully. Not because we were ashamed, but because the world wouldn't understand. Jessica wouldn't understand. She still lived in the illusion that she had won some game, that I had been discarded, forgotten, irrelevant. But behind closed doors, Ethan and I were building something stronger than any performance she ever put on. One night, we were watching an old movie. Ethan was making us tea, barefoot in the kitchen, humming some Sinatra tune. And it just hit me. This was home. Not four walls or a fancy ring. Him, his presence, his peace. He walked in and caught me staring. What? He smiled, setting the mugs down. I want to marry you, I said, barely above a whisper. Not someday. Not when the world's ready. Now. He looked stunned for a second. Then something soft and fierce settled in his eyes. Then let's do it, he said. Just you, me, and the truth. No audience, no noise. And so we did. 3 weeks later, we stood in a small garden outside the city, a quiet place we had visited during one of our weekend getaways. No guests, no photographers. Just a simple vow under oak trees that had seen more storms than any human ever could. I wore a cream silk dress, no veil, no makeup drama. Just me, unfiltered, with tears in my eyes and courage in my chest. He wore navy, classic, calm, handsome in a way that felt effortless. The officiant read the vows. But it was Ethan's voice that echoed in my soul. I never thought I'd get another chance to love this deeply. But Claire, with you, I found a home I didn't know I was still searching for. And when it was my turn, I didn't read from the paper. You reminded me that I wasn't what they left behind. I am what I've chosen to become, and I choose this, us, every day from here forward. When he slipped the ring on my finger, it wasn't just a symbol of love. It was my declaration of freedom. Freedom from Jessica's shadow, from Ryan's betrayal, from the voice in my head that told me I was unworthy of something whole. After we kissed, we didn't throw rice or cut a cake. We walked hand in hand along the nearby lake, quiet, peaceful, powerful. That night, I changed my last name. Not for show, not for status, but to close a chapter and open a new one where I wrote the story, not them. But the universe has a twisted sense of humor. Because just 3 days later, while sipping coffee in our kitchen, Ethan's phone buzzed. It was a message from Jessica. Can we talk? Something's not right. I feel like Claire's trying to ruin me. I stared at the screen, not with fear, but with clarity. She still didn't know. She had no idea I was now her stepmother. And something told me she was about to find out in the most unforgettable way. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent, strategic, waiting like a storm behind the clouds until the thunder becomes impossible to ignore. For me, it had been building for months, not out of spite, but out of justice. Not to hurt her, but to finally heal me. Jessica had no idea. Not a clue that while she flaunted her stolen romance with Ryan like a trophy, I had quietly rewritten the ending of our story. Not a whisper of suspicion that the woman she betrayed had married the one man who would change everything. Her father. Until that Sunday afternoon. Ethan and I had just come back from a small weekend getaway in the mountains. Quiet, beautiful hours. He was putting away the luggage when the doorbell rang. I glanced at the clock. 3:12 p.m. I opened the door. And there she was. Jessica, dressed like she'd come from a brunch she needed everyone to know she attended. Silk blouse, sunglasses too big for her face, and that artificial confidence she wore like perfume. She stepped in without asking, as entitled as ever. "Dad home?" she asked, walking in like she owned the place. I closed the door behind her slowly. "He'll be down in a minute." She turned to me, arms crossed. "I've been meaning to ask, why are you always here? Are you still clinging to the family because of what happened with Ryan?" I smiled, slow and deliberate. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm not clinging. I am the family now." She blinked. The confusion was instant, visible, delicious. "What the hell does that mean?" Footsteps came down the stairs. Ethan walked in, casual as ever. "Hey, Jess." She turned, momentarily distracted. Then her eyes dropped to his hand, to the gold band on his finger, then to mine. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Her brain was catching up, racing to connect dots that were already carved into stone. "Wait, is this a joke?" I stepped forward, voice calm, sweet, deadly. "It's not a joke, Jessica. I'm your stepmother." The silence that followed? Perfect. She laughed. Once. A high-pitched, desperate laugh. "You married my dad? What the hell is wrong with you?" "What's wrong with me?" I said, tilting my head. "You seduced my boyfriend, lied to my face, mocked my pain. But here's the thing, Jessica. Karma doesn't always come with sirens. Sometimes it wears a wedding ring." Ethan tried to intervene. "Jess, calm down. It's not what you... Don't," she snapped, her mask finally cracking. "This is disgusting. She used you. She just wanted to get back at me." He looked at her, quiet for a moment, then, "And what exactly did you do to deserve getting back at?" She froze, because for the first time, someone saw through her carefully constructed fantasy. I stepped closer. "You thought you could break me. You thought I'd stay shattered. But instead, I found someone who treats me with respect, with grace, with love. And the fact that it's your father? Well, poetic, isn't it?" Jessica stormed out, her face flushed with the kind of rage only truth can stir. And I stood there, finally whole. Not because she was angry, not because I'd won, but because I didn't need her apology anymore. I didn't need closure. I had built my own. I turned to Ethan, and he wrapped his arms around me. No words, just a quiet, steady heartbeat pressed against mine. That night, as we sat on the back porch, sipping wine beneath a violet sky, I realized something. The best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming someone they can't hurt anymore. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who strike the deepest wounds. But pain, when transformed with purpose, becomes power. And in the silence between heartbreak and healing, that's where revenge is born. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about reclaiming my voice, about choosing myself in a world that tried to write me off as collateral damage. Jessica thought she shattered me, but instead, I became something she never saw coming, stronger, wiser, and untouchably free. Because real revenge? It's not screaming in their face. It's smiling as you walk away from the wreckage they created and building something better out of the ashes. If you felt every twist of this story in your gut, if you've ever been broken and had to rebuild yourself from the ground up, this space is for you. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's the worst betrayal you've ever survived and how did it change you? Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because on Revenge Diary, we don't just tell stories.